How's that? I still went out from Reno. I was still chased by 20 hounds. Didn't get to sleep last night till the morning came around. Said out running but a tick. The guitar can still go down. Okay. All right. Good. I'm glad we're doing this. All right. You get the insider's view. What other songs do we do, John? Okay. All right. Said out running but to take my time. A friend of the devil is a... Now I can't hear it at all. Yeah. Out running but to take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. I get home before daylight. I just might get some sleep. Okay, thank you.
Welcome to the John and Sean show. You know that storm we had about an hour ago? Well, that ain't nothing compared to what you're going to be listening to tonight.
We are so uncoordinated. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce my dear friend, Zen Master, writer supreme with sublime comedic and philosophical talents, noteworthy jazz and blues musician, loyal husband, and all-around professor of literature, songwriting, and Zen Buddhist philosophy, Sean Murphy, and you may now applaud so long as what you create is the sound of one hand clapping. Thank you. Sean is very young. He was born in 1957, the year that Fats Domino sang Blueberry Hill and I'm Walking, Elvis Presley crooned Love Me Tender and All Shook Up, Jailhouse Rock, George Hamilton IV sang A Rose and a Baby Ruth, the Diamond sang Little Darling, Marty Robbins in a white sport coat and a pink carnation, the Everly Brothers hit the charts with Bye Bye Love and Wake Up Little Susie, Jerry Lee Lewis sang Whole Lot of Shaking Going On and Great Balls of Fire, Buddy Holly and the Crickets had the hits, That'll Be the Name, Peggy Sue, Danny and the Juniors did Add the Hop, and Little Richard checked in with Long Tall Sally and Lucille, and the point I'm trying to make with this litany of great rock and roll hits is that they came out the year when I was 17 years old and at the height of America's juvenile delinquent rock and roll obsession, years when all the great music in America was created, and I was there, I participated, but Sean was obviously born too late. By the time Sean hit 17 years old, America was forced to listen to such stirring singers as the Bleeding Heart and failed opera diva Barbara Streisand yodeling The Way We Were, that Australian Miss Goody Two-Shoes Olivia Newton-John, Let Me Be There, the already late Paul McCartney singing Helen Wheels in a know-nothing band called Wings, Donny Osmond, who was no Elvis Presley, singing When I Fall in Love, and John Denver, that American Mr. Goody Shoes, Goody Two-Shoes, chirping sunshine on my shoulder. I mean, talk about a lineup of wimps. Sean has worked hard, however, to overcome these disadvantages. He was a pesky little intellectual even at the age of 8. When he began writing his first novel, it was a takeoff on Tarzan of the Jungle that he called Xantor of the Lions. Sean informs me that he only got 3 pages into this novel, but it was a start, because A Journey of 1,000 Miles begins with a first step. Then Sean decided to become an erudite little kid who did animal cartoons for a fake newspaper that he put together when his parents weren't looking. He mostly wrote about frogs, lizards, and snakes. One of his characters was named Sir Isaac Newton, who was a newt. Another of his characters was called Fig Newton, who was also a nude. True story. I asked Sean if the novel he's now working on has a character in it named Newt Gingrich, but he did not think the question was funny. Sean got tired when he hit puberty, he says, and I quote, "I had other things to do with my right hand besides writing." At an early age, Sean read a lot of books. In fact, he tells me that he took a bus to the local library every week. He checked out 9 books, the maximum the law would allow. He brought them home on the bus because his family didn't have a car. And he read those 9 books in a week, returned them, and took out another 9 books. And he read those books in the next week. All the books that he checked out were about nature. Pretty soon he'd read the entire nature selection of the library. No child on earth knew more about alligators, great blue herons, beavers, duck-billed platypuses, wild pigs, sea anemones, and flying squirrels than Sean Murphy did when he was just a kid. Later, he became enamored of books by Gerald Durrell, the brother of Lawrence Durrell, the author of the Alexandria Quartet. Gerald Durrell wrote wonderful books about animals such as golden bats and pink pigeons and A Zoo in My Luggage, which is a hilarious book about hippopotamuses crossing the ocean from Angola to New York City in old-fashioned steamer trunks. What did Johnny Carson do when it all fell flat? Sean didn't do any writing in high school, but he did read the existentialists, and he went through a few personal crises wondering if his place on earth was in being or in nothingness. Sean attended college at the University of California in Santa Barbara from 1976 until 1981, and there he began to write and direct plays. And he was fascinated by the absurdist playwrights like Ionesco, Harold Pinter, Edward Albee, and Samuel Beckett. I'd like to say that he wrote and directed a play called Waiting for Rhinoceros, but he didn't. He could have, though. A play that he did write in 1978 was called The Glass Harmonica, which was about a playwright who was also a stuntman who pops out of a coffin during a funeral as a publicity stunt. For more comic relief, Sean also became a devotee of Franz Kafka. He was honing a wonderful, wacky, and also Kafkaesque sense of humor that would typify the novels that he published later in life. I mentioned he got his first guitar when he was 17. It was an acoustic Yamaha. That was in 1974, remember, when he had a choice of learning songs by Barbra Streisand or Olivia Newton-John. Instead, he wrote a lot of his own songs and then began to honor me and my immortal contemporaries by learning Bob Dylan, Buddy Waters, and James Taylor. After college, Sean also entered the movie business, working on many documentaries in support of the environment. He recalls one film about Mono Lake and another that he did about the Channel Islands. In 1986, Sean walked in the Great Peace March with 600 other crazies from Los Angeles to Chicago to New York to Washington, D.C. The trip across America took 9 months. After the Peace March, he tried to write a novel about it, failed, and then he spent 12 years writing his first published book, The Hope Valley Hubcap King. Given my own experience as a novelist, I'm amazed that he was able to whip that book out so quickly. The tale won the Hemingway Award for first novel, and Sean followed up with 2 more great novels, The Finished Man in 2004 and The Time of New Weather in 2005. He also published a beautiful nonfiction work, One Bird, One Stone, a compilation of over 100 Zen stories and interviews that has just recently been re-released. Sean is funny. His novels and short stories are often quite insane. Lunatic, absurdist, insightful satire, alternate history, and often a plea for sanity in insane times. At one moment in the Hope Valley Hubcap King, Sean's hero, B.B. Brown, quote, wandered the streets of the city, watched people stepping along the sidewalks, moving their mouths, speaking through the same apertures they used to eat. Here I am, B.B. thought, the end product of 4 billion years of evolution, and I haven't got the slightest idea what's going on. In that one little paragraph, I think Sean brilliantly has distilled what all of us feel about ourselves, our species, and the possible destination of our species on this planet. Sean decided to begin studying Zen when he read Peter Matheson's book, Nine-Headed Dragon River. That led him to the Zen Center of Los Angeles, where he studied with Mizumi Roshi, and Sean went on to become a steadfast Zen practitioner and leader himself over the past 20 years. Sean is a gentle, compassionate, and wise soul who has much wisdom and has helped many people, despite his Tourette's-type proclivity, to uncork off-the-wall ridiculous puns right in the middle of serious philosophical conversations. I have often been victimized by these ludicrous barbs, and I admit they always make me double over in laughter. I know Sean best as my dear friend and cohort writer, with whom I've been in a musical group called Los Muchachos en la Biblioteca, which meets every other Monday night in the back of Brodsky bookshop, whose owner and fellow musician is Rick Smith, who's right over there wondering how he agreed to be a part of this evening with Sean. For the last 7.5 years, we three have been playing music together, often accompanied by the likes of Craig Smith on accordion, bass, mandolin, and kazoo, Jim Bradley, the iconic bass player of Rifters fame, Jimmy Killingsworth, a fabulous musician on just about whatever instrument you put in his hands, Morten Nilsson, a Norwegian magician on the guitar, and even for a while, a year ago or so, by Chipper Thompson, who played the bass and regaled us with his Appalachian songs about cruel death, incest, alcoholism, war, depravity, white lightning, and other topics peculiar to and cherished by denizens of the Deep South. When we began our little musical group, we decided no public appearances ever, and no onlookers allowed in the bookstore, so we could just play together, have fun, no pressure, no need to practice in between sessions, just enjoy, make all the mistakes we wanted while playing together, and we were never, ever allowed to criticize each other either. Rick and Sean are allowed, however, to tune up my guitar about every 20 minutes because basically I'm tone deaf and I couldn't tune my way out of a paper bag. For some reason, when S.O.M.O.S gave Sean and me this gig, I was schmoozing with Alan McRae one day, and I blithely said, "Oh boy, me and Sean will kick ass on you guys on July 30th with our music." I don't know why I said that. I was obviously having a senior moment. So all of a sudden, this evening was advertised as a night in which we would, quote, play our guitars and sing, unquote, as well as do readings. I'm surprised that the Taos News didn't also say that we plan to chew gum, pat our heads, and rub our stomachs all at the same time. You'll be happy to know, however, that we almost never did get to practice or even plan for this evening. This is the true Zen way of putting on entertainment in town. During the last month, Sean has been on a silent retreat up in the mountains where he couldn't talk to anybody, let alone play the guitar. So I was left holding the bag with nothing to put in it, and we never got together, and my bag is still empty. However, last night, me, Sean, and Ricky did meet for an hour and try to figure out what to do. Sean told us not to worry. Just chill out, be here now. It doesn't matter if we fall flat on our faces. Just get used to the sound of one hand not clapping. And if we should meet the Buddha in the hardwood, kill it. So ladies and gentlemen, let's have a moment of existential silence. Now, the great writer, philosopher, humorist, musician, all-around good guy, and non-plus Zen master, Sean Murphy.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Good night. Wow, how do I follow that, John? We didn't discuss that part. Okay. Woo, okay.
You can get even.
I plan to. It's right here. Okay. All right, I want to read a few things because we had this crazy idea about somehow, after swearing that we would never perform publicly, we somehow, John hooked us into this musical evening, I think. Anyway, I hunted through my writings to find some things that connected with music, and I'd like to share some of those writings with you, and then do a few songs, and then introduce John. All right. Wow. Okay, so first I want to read a couple things from my Zen book, One Bird, One Stone, which just came out in a new edition and just won an award called the in Eastern religions, which is funny because it's about Zen in the West. But anyway, I'm glad it won. So there's a couple of sections that I picked out. So I did this book. Probably a lot of you have heard me read from it, but I traveled around the country for close to a year, interviewing senior Zen teachers and practitioners, and because some of you may have seen those collections of Eastern wisdom that have been popular from time to time and get published. I call them miso soups for the soul. Anyway, nobody had ever done one based on completely Western sources. That is, teachers who either taught in the West or came of age in the West. This is one about one of my favorite eccentric Zen teachers named S.O.M.O.S Nakagawa, who was one of the first Zen abbots of a Zen monastery to come over and teach Americans. So one Sunday morning, S.O.M.O.S Nakagawa, together with the shakuhachi flute master, Wadazumi Doso, and Wadazumi's wife, who I'm sorry, I only know as Mrs. Wadazumi, was invited to visit the New York City home of artists Harvey and Patricia Konigsberg. The visit came at a time when Harvey and Patricia were going through a particularly difficult period in their lives. On entering their loft in Little Italy, S.O.M.O.S Roshi paused before a painting Harvey had done of Dr. Bill Walling, who was one of the founders of the Bioenergetics Institute and had been an important teacher to the Konigsbergs. "This man is a bodhisattva," S.O.M.O.S announced. "Is he still with us?" Bodhisattva is a Zen saint, basically. As it turned out, Dr. Walling had recently died. The Konigsbergs had felt dissatisfied with the memorial service, and they lacked a sense of closure. On hearing the story, S.O.M.O.S Roshi improvised a memorial service on the spot, an event the couple found extremely moving. Afterward, to shift the mood, S.O.M.O.S began randomly opening closets. Inside, he found a variety of martial arts attire and other articles of clothing. "Ah," exclaimed S.O.M.O.S, "wonderful costumes." He began pulling out items and handing them to the other guests, and within a short time had created an impromptu costume party. Next, to the amazement of his hosts, he proceeded to rearrange their living room furniture. Once the scene was set to S.O.M.O.S liking, there was a performance by Wadazumi's wife, who was a dance master, to an accompaniment of pounded pots and pans arranged by S.O.M.O.S. Then Wadazumi Doso announced that since the Konigsbergs seemed to have a lot of pets around, he was going to perform a special song for beasts. No sooner had he begun to play on penny whistle, as he did not have a shakuhachi flute with him, than their three cats and dog began to filter into the room, ignoring the assembled human beings. They patted around Wadazumi Doso as he played. After the piece was finished, reports the Konigsbergs, he began a different song for human beings, and all the animals left. Although S.O.M.O.S Roshi had planned to spend only an hour or two, he ended up staying the entire day. The whole experience, remembers the Konigsbergs, was like a bombardment of light. And what about the furniture? "Oh, the change lifted the feeling of the place entirely," the Konigsbergs say. "We never put it back." Here's just a brief one about one of the first American Zen teachers who went to Japan so shortly after the war that he needed a special visa to go over, and nobody could figure out how to give an American a visa to go over and study Zen Buddhism. What a weird thing to do in the wake of World War II. So he ended up having a special visa issued for compassionate purposes, went over and studied Zen. He was also a concert pianist, and he supported himself in Japan by giving piano lessons in Western music. When he came back, he started a Zen center in Maine, and his name was Walter Noack. He recently died. But he gave famous piano concerts for many years at his Zen center, and people would travel for 10 hours from New York City to go up and hear them. Walter Noack was giving a piano concert one evening. He was playing Beethoven's Piano Sonata number 32, a composition legendary for its difficulty, when the power suddenly failed and the performance space was plunged into darkness. Without missing a note, Noack played the sonata through to the end. Later, he was asked how he'd managed to continue when he could no longer read his sheet music. "If you can't play it in the darkness," replied Noack, "you can't play it in the light." That one's particularly fitting because I'm not sure we're going to be able to play it in the light. All right, I want to read you a little bit from a novel that I've been working on called Wilson's Way, which one of these days, hopefully in the coming year, I'll get finished and get into print. I need to give you a little setup. Some of you may have heard me read from this novel, whenever that was, a year or more ago, one of the S.O.M.O.S reading series. If you haven't, I need to fill you in a little bit. The piece I read was about a child who has a miraculous survival from an auto accident, which leads his parents and everyone else who knows him to conclude that the child has a charmed life. Well, the child grows up to be a 350-pound white jazz pianist who tries to make it in jazz, but eventually, after some career in jazz, when jazz kind of starts to falter, he moves to a mountain town in Colorado and opens a pawn shop, okay? So this is Wilson, okay? We'd have to accept, however, that anyone seeing Wilson's life today might be hard-pressed to describe it as charmed. He had a fair life, maybe even a decent one. His shop, Wilson's Odds and Sods Emporium, occupied the front of the old saloon building down by the railroad tracks. He had his room above the stairs, and outside his window, the enormous spread of spruce and fir and ponderosa pine country, the blue mountains draped in snow falling away to the distance over the storefronts on the other side of Ute Street. But if you caught Wilson in the right mood, he'd lean back on his stool behind the counter of the old bar that still occupied his shop and count off on his fingers all the times he cheated death. Automobile accidents, 4. Subways and other forms of public transport, 3. Puncture wounds, 2. Throttling, once. Poisoning, twice unintentionally and once intentionally. Lightning, only once as of yet. Whether or not you thought Wilson had his count exactly right, you could tell there were other times and ways he'd nearly crossed that line between this world and the next. All you had to do was take one look at the man to know it must be so. It was a certain feeling in the eyes, the way he looked at the world around him, as though taking stock. And you could see it in the way all that flesh hung on his bones. You could hear it most of all when this most enormous of piano men played the blues, though for a good many years no one in White Rock ever heard him play. This is a fictional town in Colorado somewhere. Most of the town didn't even know he could play. Never knew Wilson had once dreamed of being a jazz man. Had been one, in fact, for a time, before the charmed life of that particular music had run its course. Yet sometimes if you were walking along the sidewalk on a winter night, coming home late from a poker game, or closing time at the Great Divide Tavern, you might hear something, a ghostly nocturne drifting between the snowflakes that always seemed to fall at that time of night. And you'd know that was Wilson speaking to nobody, talking in his true voice. And something about that music coming from that great big lonely body all alone in his shop, playing for no one but himself, or maybe playing for the night or for God, if you wanted to think about it that way. Something in it would send a blue shiver right through you, and you'd know this was a man who'd seen the other side of death and lived to tell about it. This is next chapter. These are a number of brief chapters. This one's called Enter Keys. The man seemed to come out of nowhere. There Wilson was playing the piano one winter night after the town had closed up, when something made him turn and look towards the front door of his shop. He was just in time to see a dark figure, silhouetted for an instant against the snowy whiteness, swing open the door and step on through, as though a man-sized fragment of the night, having heard the music for so long, had decided to come in for a closer listen. The way Wilson always remembered it afterwards was this. A black man dressed in black clothes had just broken himself like a man-sized shape out of the night and strode on in, stars gleaming in his eyes. It might have seemed a peculiar meeting there in the darkness of the old saloon, had there not been something about the man's presence that put Wilson instantly at ease. How long had he been standing outside, listening at this time of night? The man looked around Wilson's shop, hummed to himself a few times as though in reflection, turned to cast his gaze around the place, eyes lingering over cameras and wooden cigar store Indians, and musical instruments hanging from the ceiling. Then, without so much as a bye or leave, he lifted an old trumpet, battered and bent, from where it hung, illuminated in a shaft of light from a rafter. You know, I pawned a horn just like this back when I was young, still all full of myself. He put the mouthpiece to his lips, blew a couple of experimental notes. Told myself I'd be back for it the week after, but I never did make it. I love that horn. The man laughed as though at some private joke, then glanced at Wilson with a casual lift of an eyebrow. You play the blues? A little, Wilson said. Ain't no one plays a little blues, the man laughed, running his fingers over the horn's tarnished bill. The blues is big, big as you are, man, bigger. The blues don't stop nowhere, it's got no edges. He blew a longer trill, settled into a string of notes. Wilson could tell without half looking which horn the man had picked up, that battered old piece of navy brass with a Harmon mute that he'd had ever since he opened the shop. Best horn in the place, he always thought, though it was also the ugliest, so no one ever gave it a second glance. But this player, whoever he was, sure knew what to do with it. And now that he'd settled into the melody proper, Wilson plunked his fingers down on the keys, or more like his fingers plunked themselves, finding the shape of that E-flat ninth without ever having to think about it. Round midnight, Loverman, Trinkle Trinkle, Equinox. The whole world was there with them in that old saloon, and even the brown cowboy and Indian pictures stared down from the wall in rapt attention, seeming to listen. The possibilities, as Wilson had always known, were infinite. There in between the time and the tempo, the chords and the harmony, was all the freedom he'd ever need. If only he could play 24 hours a day, with someone bringing him food and water when he needed it, he'd never lack for anything. Hell, Wilson figured, if only he could play 24 hours a day, he wouldn't need anyone to bring him food. He reckoned he could live on what he already had stored in his body for a couple of months. Playing the blues 24 hours a day, now that would be a charmed life. The stranger returned the next night, then the next, always just around midnight, near as Wilson could tell. He hardly ever spoke. It was weeks before Wilson knew his name, or where he was staying, or what he was doing in this little town. Just as well not to ask, he figured. Wilson somehow didn't want to know too much, didn't want to mess around too much with words, which he knew from his own hard experience had a peculiar way of mucking things up. Every night around midnight, the front door to the shop creaked open and the man came in to pick up the old trumpet and play. It was like a visitation, Wilson thought, the ghost of Monk or Bird, Miles or Diz. Until finally one night the man put down his horn at the end of a session, and instead of just nodding a thank you and disappearing off into the darkness, he sat himself down on one of the old bar stools, looked around at the still swinging saloon doors and said, "Don't suppose there's any chance of getting a drink in this place? Got your choice of ginger ale or Pepsi?" "Ginger ale, how'd you know that was my drink?" Wilson rummaged around for a couple of glasses, set one in front of the man and one for himself. "I can't drink the real stuff anymore," Wilson explained. "Darn shame," said the man, "neither can I." At that, the trumpeter took a sip from his soda and looked around the place. "Still," he said, "it's almost like old times." "It is old times," Wilson said. "Nothing ever changes around here." "That's why I came here, hoping to find a place where nothing changes." Then the man smiled, a real wide smile for real, and extended his hand. "Folks call me Keys," he said. This is just a brief sample of the next chapter called Masters and Keys. It was the middle of the night when the thought struck him like a thunderbolt from some great alarm clock in the sky, rousing Wilson instantly from the depths of a sound sleep. Keys. The words appeared in his mind before he was rightly awake, like holdovers from a half-forgotten dream. Keys. Masterson. Wilson rubbed at his eyes to get them open. Masterson goddamn Keys. He shuffled downstairs in his voluminous bathrobe, flanks scraping both sides of the stairwell, words creaking underfoot, fished out his dusty jazz encyclopedias from beneath boxes of Indian head pennies and camera cases beneath the old bar, the turntable in his mind spinning, pieces connecting all the while. Masterson Keys, the hottest bebop trumpeter no one ever heard of. He briefly succeeded Miles Davis in Charlie Parker's band, disappeared one evening before. Damn it, what was the story? Wilson banged his palm against his head trying to clear it while he rummaged through the boxes. Wilson had heard the story many times. Wasn't it Masterson Keys who disappeared on the eve of Charlie Parker's Loverman sessions, maybe picked up on a drug charge, or some said sent off to the loony bin? He'd had to be replaced at the last minute by who? Maybe they called Miles back in. Anyway, it was a little-known event that was said to have contributed to Charlie Parker's own subsequent breakdown and sojourn at the loony bin. It was all coming back, even as he hauled up the first volume of the encyclopedia from beneath decades of dust and paged through it. Masters and Keys, almost entirely unrecorded, only a couple of obscure 78s, now long out of print. Still, his stature remained such that even in the jazz circles of Wilson's time, a not infrequent response to a solo by a new trumpeter on any standard was, "Should have heard Keys do that one." Masters and Keys? The man was a legend. What the heck was he doing in this small town? What I did come of age getting really involved in was what was happening right about the time I graduated college, not and slightly before, not the Barbra Streisand and Donny Osmond era, but the new wave stuff that was happening. And the first thing, I had a friend of mine who later became a doctor, no longer plays anymore, but we had a little band called Dr. D and the MGs. Okay, it's a little derivative. But my friend Dave was a doctor, so anyway, that's what we called ourselves. And we started out by doing some punk songs, and I wonder if I dare play you a fragment. I think I have to play you a fragment of this one song. I won't put you through the whole thing, but this is one of our first ones. I drink Coca-Cola if I want to. I lose control if I want to. I drink Coca-Cola if I want to. I lose control if I want to. Don't bother me, I'm feeling alright. I feel a need for some sodium sulfide. When God made me, he made MSG. When God made me, he made MSG. Not many people can summarize an entire punk career in 30 seconds. What started to happen after punk was new wave, which actually was a little more interesting to me. And the next song that we worked on actually turned out to be a little bit prescient because of what was soon to come with all the new diseases that cropped up in the 80s. But at this time, it was merely an innocent, humorous song. So here they come, the Microbes. I cannot see them, but I feel them. Yes, I know they're all around. They are hiding underwater. They're hiding underground. They make us so unhappy. They cause war and disease. They are breeding in our bathrooms. They are floating on the breeze. Don't you think you ought to worry about the microbes? Da, 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 da. I never get to do these songs. Worry about the microbes. Da, 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 da. Can you all hear the lyrics? They're very important. No? Abound. There's amoebas all around. They contaminate our food. They are dirty. They are crude. When they want to breed, you know, they just split in half. They have no sense of humor, so they hardly ever laugh. Don't you think you ought to worry about the microbes? Da, 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 da. Don't you think you ought to worry about the microbes? Da, 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 da. just feel them out there, multiplying, dividing, splitting in half. Better watch out, now they're coming to get you. They're the microbes. It's not over yet. Lurking deep inside us, there are things we cannot see. They are inside other people. They're inside you and me. They are inside our husbands. They're inside all our wives. Won't somebody please remove them? They're fouling up our lives. Everybody, da da da. Microbes, da da da. Microbes, da da da. Oh, microbes, da da da. Oh, microbes, da da da. Microbes, da da da. Microbes. So I'm going to invite up Rick and John to back me up on the next song.
All right.
Rick
Yay, Rick!
on percussion and John on backup vocals.
No, I'm on the guitar.
And guitar, okay.
Dang.
Okay. I know, but you don't know these chords, John. That's okay.
No.
Okay, percussion. All right. That's never stopped them before. This is the 13th floor one. So this one requires a little bit of preamble because when I was a teenager, aside from all the things John claimed I did, which are untrue, I was a paper boy in Miami Beach, Florida, which is my hometown and the first town in the United States slated to go underwater with global warming. So, and I used to deliver in all the high-rise condominiums and hotels. I delivered the newspaper. And one of the things you notice pretty quickly is when you go up the high-rises and the elevators is there's never a 13th floor. So I started to wonder what happens in this kind of Bardo realm between 12 and 14. This requires a little bit of explanation in New Mexico because sometimes, well, we don't have that many high-rise buildings, do we? But anyway, this one's called 13th Floor. Got a black cat living on my hall. Got a Ouija board hanging on my wall. Take a look into my crystal ball. Gotta look out of the window now, you just might fall. Oh, oh, yeah. Got a horseshoe hanging upside down. I get up when the sun goes down. Strangest people always hanging around. Don't try to look for me now, I can't be found. Living on the 13th floor. Living on the 13th floor. You know I'm living on the 13th floor. Living on the 13th floor. Well, Friday nights there's no place to go. The boys come down and play carol. Eagle, Frank, and Drac and Mo. It's like a scene out of Edgar Allan Poe. Living on the 13th floor. 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 Going up 1. Going up 2. Going up, everybody, 3. Going up 4. Going up 5. You can all count, can't you? 6. Going up 7. Going up 8. You know where this is going. 9. Going up 10. Going up 11. 12. Living on the 13th floor. 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 Well, people try, but they can't seem to find my door. The elevator don't stop at my floor. They look and they look and they look some more. I'm living in a limbo on the 13th floor. Living 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 on the 13th floor. People try, but they can't seem to find my door. The elevator don't stop at my floor. Special thank you to the Brodskyettes. All right. Lest you think that I'm stuck back in the 70s, I'm going to do one more song. This is a rap tune. All right. And we'll see if we can pull it off. We're going to do our best. Ready? You're short, you got no style, your body shape is infantile, you are inept in situations that call for charming conversation, and in this you think you're to blame for suffering the world's disdain. You think the problems that you got are all your fault, but they're not. For deep inside there's a double strand. You bow and scrape to its command. You can't escape, you cannot hide from the savage nucleotide. So when you got nowhere to go, blame it on DNA. When you can't make the scene, blame it on your daddy's genes. When you're sitting home alone, blame it on the chromosome. DNA, 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 hey. Determined by that double helix. It don't seem right, it don't seem fair, but DNA is everywhere. Give me a D. D. Give me an N. N. Give me an A. A. Give If you're dumb and if you're mean, it's not your fault. It's just your genes, your personality. In every facet, enslaved to deoxyribonucleic acid. The reason for our mass psychosis is we're victims of mitosis. But don't despair, don't lose resolve, for humankind is still evolving. Perhaps one day we'll recombine, and everything will be just fine, 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 fine. So when you got nowhere to go, why don't you blame it on DNA? When you can't make the scene, blame it on your daddy's genes. When you're sitting home alone, blame it on the chromosome. DNA, DNA, DNA. The man is a legend. And because of this legend, the reality of his past has sometimes been obscured. John Nichols, as we often say during evening jam sessions at Brodsky Bookshop, could have been Bob Dylan. I'm going to explain why this didn't happen, and I'm going to take this opportunity to enlighten you on what really did happen. John Nichols was born to a family of Maasai warriors on the plains of Kenya. During early maneuvers for the later Mau Mau rebellion, he was lost in the bush, where he was eventually raised by hyenas. His exposure to the egalitarian structure of the hyena pack was an enormous influence on the development of his later politics, as well as upon his singing. Growing into his teen years, John sought human contact, but because of undernourishment during his time in the bush, he never reached the necessary 7-foot stature to be accepted by his tribal group, not to mention his unnaturally pale skin color. Instead, he was adopted by a group of missionaries, thus beginning his early flirtation with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Having reached America in the early 1960s, he sought out the counterculture of Greenwich Village, which was the only place where an albino Maasai warrior Jehovah's Witness raised by hyenas could fit right in. And thus began his short-lived career as a folk singer. Sadly, his unusual mix of hyena-influenced vocals, which persist to this day, as you'll soon hear for yourself, combined with his proselytizing lyrics, never caught on. And as we know, a young Bob Dylan moved to the forefront instead. Undaunted, John abandoned his newfound missionary faith and returned instead to his love of the natural world and of writing, embarking on a career as an author. He soon produced his first book, a well-known environmental tract, which examined the DDT influence inability to reproduce, which was then prevalent among bird life. Yes, his best-selling Sterile Cuckoo later became a film in which Liza Minnelli plays an egg that sadly will never hatch. This was one of her most touching though overlooked roles. There followed a string of other books, the titles of which will be familiar to you all, as well as a number of other challenges the struggling young author had to overcome. He delved into the psychological with his next book, which was about one man's delusional fixation on disguising himself as a reptile. It was called The Lizard of Phoniness. A roadblock John experienced shortly after relocating to Taos came after he embarked on an ambitious 3-part study of Catholic theology, originally to be titled The New Mexico Trinity. Sadly, a misprint by the publisher in the preliminary publicity accidentally dubbed it the New Mexico Trilogy. Undaunted as always, after all, this was a man raised by hyenas, The indomitable Mr. Nichols quickly rewrote the 3 volumes, turning the first into an academic study of a famous and unusual group narcoleptic episode in which a team of adolescent baseball players all fell asleep on the field. Perhaps surprisingly, his Milagro teen field snore became perhaps his best-known title. He turned next to a study of hospital policy among immigrants with his follow-up, The Magic Gurney. And he finally documented his brief flirtation with enlightened beer making in Nirvana Brews. There followed another medical track called Ghost in the Mucus. 2 studies of alternative building methods, On the Mesa and American Mud. He turned to really obscure territory with his study of youthful pastimes among Lepidoptera, his little-known Toys of the Butterflies. And recent years brought 2 popular collections of culinary essays, The Empanada Brotherhood and On Top of Spoon Mountain. Can you imagine a more eclectic command of subject matter? And that's only a handful of his well-known titles. But now, ladies and gentlemen, to give you his version of the story. He's yours, he's ours, he's his. I present Mr. John Nichols.
Geez, I went so easy on Sean. The title of this speech is My Life in Music, or Yearning to be Irreverent. My life in music began when I was only knee-high to a kazoo. My mother was French, and during the first 2 years of my life, she sang me to sleep with a lovely lullaby called Fée Dodo. My mother died in 1942 when I was 2 years old, but later my French grandmother taught me the words to Fée Dodo, and I sang my own kids to sleep with that song almost until they were in their teens. It goes, Fée Dodo, Tania, petite sœur, Fée Dodo, t'auras un gâteau. My father played the guitar with a great deal of vigor, and he often sang me to sleep when I was a kid with songs like The Blue-Tailed Fly, the Crawdad song, Frankie and Johnny. Sometimes he sang ponderous and exciting Russian songs to me, or French ballads that he learned from my mother before he died. My favorite song was Les Filles de Saint-Malo. Lorsque les marins bretons sont en avant dans les voiles, ils chantent tous aux étoiles et gaiement cette chanson. Les filles de Saint-Malo ont les yeux couleur de l'eau. In 1947, when we lived in Westbury, New York, and I was 7 years old, for Christmas I got a Tex Ritter record. I really loved that record. It had songs on it like Old Shep and Roly Poly, Daddy's Little Fatty, and Oh Me, Oh Mine, Miss Molly, and a Woody Guthrie song called Oklahoma Hills. I learned all those songs and much later adapted the Elvis Presley version of Old Shep on my guitar, and I used it to seduce girls. It worked every time. You sing to teenage girls about your best pal, your dog named Old Shep, who finally gets so old that you have to put him out of his misery with your 6-gun, and Old Shep looks up at you with baleful eyes, saying he understands. And then the last lines of the song are, Old Shep is gone, where the good doggies go. No more on this earth will he roam. But if dogs have a heaven, there's one thing I know. Old Shep has a wonderful home. And I promise, if you sing it right, you will get laid. If you don't get laid, believe me, you just aren't singing it right. Starting when I was 8 years old, my dad and my new stepmother sent me away to camp for 4 straight summers. While I was at camp, we sat around campfires, and the counselors taught us a whole bunch of strange songs. They were songs like There's a Tavern in the Town or In the Evening by the Moonlight. They also taught us lots of Stephen Foster songs like The Old Folks at Home. And another thing those campfire hootenannies specialized in was college football songs. So I learned Bulldog, Bulldog, Bow Wow Wow, Eli Yale. Lord Jeffrey Amherst was a soldier of the king, and he came from across the seas to the Frenchmen and the Indians. He never did a thing in the wilds of the wild country. And I'm a brown man born and a brown man bed. When I die, I'll be a brown man dead. So it's rah-rah, Bernolio, rah-rah, Bernolio, rah-rah, Bernolio, brown, brown, brown. I went to Ivy League camps. They also taught us standard racist songs like Old Black Joe, and Bible songs like We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder, and Were You There When They Crucified My Lord? Oh Lord, it makes me want to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? When I got to be about 9 or 10, my dad upped the ante a little bit with me. He taught me St. James Infirmary, Willie the Weeper, I Ain't Got No Use for Woman, and a really misogynistic blues tune called I'm Evil. We sang it together with much gusto to celebrate his divorce from my first stepmother. Early Sunday morning, sprung my breakfast in my bed. I took a sip of coffee, threw the cup right out of head because I'm evil. I'm downright evil, evil as a man can be. I grew up going to Episcopal church, so every Sunday I had to stand in a pew and belt out hymns like one was a lawyer and one was a priest and one was killed by a fierce wild beast, but all of them were soldiers of Christ, and I mean to be one too. At one point in 1953, we moved to a tiny town called Calvin Run in rural northern Virginia, where I attended the 7th and 8th grades. Instead of saying the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, I seem to recall that we all stood up and we sang, "Carry me back to old Virginia. That's where the cotton and the corn and taters grow. That's where I labored so hard for old Massa. That land is Virginia, the land where I was born." I do remember the 8th grade because I became enamored of pop music. And I started learning songs like Eddie Fisher singing Oh My Papa and Frank Sinatra singing Young at Heart and Patti Page doing Cross Over the Bridge. If you're the kind of guy who's got a gal in every port and you forgot the rules of love that life has always taught and you broke as many hearts as there are ripples in a stream, well, brother, here's the only way that you can be redeemed. Cross over the bridge, leave your fickle past behind you, and true romance will find you. Brother, cross over that bridge. And I think it was Debbie Reynolds who sang Tammy. I love that song. Who can ever forget the immortal words? The old hooty owl, hooty hoos to the dove. Tammy, Tammy, Tammy. I told the possum in the gum tree. I told the raccoon on the ground. I told everyone but my darling of the happiness I found. Okay, enough already. After the 8th grade, I went away to prep school up near Hartford, Connecticut. That was in 1954. 1954 is the year that Bill Haley and his Comets came up with Shake, Rattle, and Roll and Dim, Dim the Lights. And then, in 1955, they exploded with Rock Around the Clock, and suddenly I really perked up my ears and I wanted to be a musician. Put your glad rags on, join me, we're gonna have some fun. When the clock strikes one, we're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock in the broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. I mean, I was up there in a prep school wearing a coat and tie and a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches to class every day. And all of a sudden, this huge thunderbolt came down out of the sky and blasted my prep school to smithereens. And when we all pushed our way out of the shattered bricks and torn asunder ivy vines, this immense voice came out of the sky saying, "Listen to this, you preppy little elitist spawn of the running dog, warmongering bourgeois lackeys of capitalist pigs." And suddenly, it was Rock Around the Clock, See You Later, Alligator, Frankie Lyman singing Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Carl Perkins, Blue Suede Shoes, and Elvis's Heartbreak Hotel. And then music got serious, and I really sat up and I paid attention. There's a room full of money, two for the show, three to get her in, now go, can't go. quit listening to Patty Page and Eddie Fisher and Wagnerian operas and the Brandenburg concertos, and I just went fucking nuts for Elvis Presley, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Ricky Nelson, the Everly Brothers, the Diamonds, the Coasters, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, Peggy Sue, Long Tall Sally, Rip It Up, Tutti Frutti, Jailhouse Rock, Johnny Be Good, Bebop, Alula. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. I mean, Shakespeare had all these sonnets, no. And Keats, or was it Shelley, wrote Ode to Aggression, no. And Wordsworth wandered around lonely as a cloud that floats on high, or vales and hills searching for his dancing daffodils, super dull. And all of a sudden, my generation had Long Tall Sally, she built real sweet. She got everything Long John gonna need, oh baby. Ooh, baby. Tonight. I bought me a little electric guitar, put it in tune. I was rocking and rolling. Soon I got me a fast car, some pretty women, a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I never, ever looked back. Saturday night and I just got paid. Fool about my money, can't seem to save. Well, all I'll say is go, go, have a time, 'cause Saturday night, man, and I feel fine. I did feel fine. Of course, I should say, around this time, the mid-1950s, I also got hit by the folk music bug, which was shoved down my throat by a guy named Alan Lomax, who went all over the United States recording folk songs. So at the same time that I fell in love with rock and roll, I also fell in love with Lead Belly and Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and Odetta. And about the same time I also got into the blues, and Josh White was my superhero. And so was Champion Jack Dupree and Screamin' Jay Hawkins and Joe Turner and all those guys. I also freaked out on Tom Lehrer songs. For a while I thought that irreverent and obnoxious Tom Lehrer was the greatest singer that I had ever heard. I loved the Old Dope Peddler, I Want to Go Back to Dixie, My Hometown, the Hunting Song, and Be Prepared. Be prepared, as through life you march alone. Be prepared, that's the Boy Scouts marching song. Don't solicit for your sister, that's not nice, unless you get a big percentage of her price. Be prepared. And if you're looking for adventure of a new and different kind, you come across a Girl Scout who is similarly inclined. Don't be frightened, don't be nervous, don't be scared. Be prepared. I have to admit I was a true juvenile delinquent, so I also got into filthy folk singers like Oscar Brand. Oh dear, what can the matter be? 7 old ladies locked in the lavatory. They were there from Sunday to Saturday. Nobody knew they were there. The first was the Bishop of Chichestere's daughter. She went in to pass some superfluous water. She pulled at the chain and the rising tide caught her, but nobody knew she was there. Or, get this. This is actually my favorite Oscar Brand tune. Cats on the rooftop, cats on the stile, cats with the clap and the crabs in the piles, cats with their assholes wreathed in smiles, steeped in the throes of fornication. This guy was famous, Oscar Brand. Don't panic though. Folk music and blues music also got me politicized. I listened to Lead Belly singing It's a Bourgeois Town about racism in Washington, D.C. And off of a Josh White record, I learned Strange Fruit. I mean, picture this. I'm a kid wearing a coat and a tie and a tweed jacket to my classes, a kid with a crew cut no less, and I'm sitting there stroking my old Gibson guitar, singing, Southern trees bear a strange and a bitter fruit, blood on the leaves and blood on the roots, black bodies swinging in an April breeze, pastoral scenes of the gallant South, of the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth. Here is fruit for the winds to blow, for the winds to blow and the crows to suck. Here indeed is a strange and bitter fruit. Then the next thing you know, my tie and the tweed suit is gone, And I'm wearing a dungaree jacket, and I got my Camel cigarettes rolled up in the right sleeve of my white t-shirt. I'm wearing high-water chino pants and a pair of black leather shit kickers with silver buttons up the side. I've got a Chicago haircut flat top on the top with a V curl in front like Elvis and long sides swept back into a DA, a duck's ass, and I'm singing songs like, he wore high denim trousers and motorcycle boots and a black leather jacket with an eagle on the back. On the muscle of his arm was a big tattoo with a picture of a heart saying, Mother, I love you. Chuck Berry came out with Johnny B. Good and Sweet Little 16 in 1958. That's like saying Mickey Mantle hit 54 homers and his teammate Roger Maris hit 61 homers in the summer of 1961. How could one man, Chuck Berry, create the two best songs ever written in the English language in the same year? I mean, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones had some pretty good years later on, but nobody had a year like Chuck Berry in 1958. Sweet Little 16 and Johnny B. Good is like writing The Great Gatsby and The Sun Also Rises in the same year. They're really rocking in Bandstand, Philadelphia, PA, deep in the heart of Texas, around the Frisco Bay. Down in Louisiana next to New Orleans, back up in the woods amongst the evergreens, in a little house made out of earth mud, the little country boy named Johnny B. Good. He never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play the guitar just like the ringing of a bell. Go, 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 Johnny, go. In 1958, I went off to Hamilton College in upstate New York. I'd been working in the dish room in the Maple Hill restaurant in West Hartford, Connecticut, and I had enough money to buy myself a big lime green, hollow body, F-hole, Gretsch electric guitar. I could only play 3 chords on it, E, A, and B7, but you can play every song ever written with 3 chords on the guitar. So that's not as great a handicap as you might think. For example, Bo Diddley made millions of dollars just playing 1 chord on the guitar. 3 chords and you're a genius. Bo Diddley had a farm. On that farm he had some women. Women here and women there. Women everywhere. Hey, Bo Diddley. I got to college, I was pledged into a fraternity, and the fraternity had house parties 3 times a year, and the house parties were a totally out-of-control zoo during which everybody got radically snockered on beer, vodka, and milk punch. And the only song anybody ever played and danced to or tried unsuccessfully to fuck to was Ray Charles' What Did I Say? See the gal with the red dress on, she's gonna shake it, baby, all night long. It's all right, blah. I mean, there we were in classes, having to wade through all this boring dreck about the transcendentalists, reading incomprehensible, boring books like Moby Dick, and being forced to read out-of-date, irrelevant, boring plays by Euripides and Sophocles. But then, thank God, 3 times a year we were actually allowed some intellectual stimulation during house parties from the music we enjoyed, and I grabbed up my Gretsch guitar and I wailed, see the gal with the diamond ring, she knows how to shake that thing, it's all right now. So at least I learned something in college. Between my junior and senior years, the summer of 1961, I lived in New York City writing a novel, and one night I got thrown out of Malachi's bar with a bass player from Greenwich Village who took me down there to meet a blues maven named Fred Neal, author of the Midnight Cowboy song. And Fred sent me up to the Bronx to take guitar lessons from the Reverend Gary Davis, who was a blind evangelical street preacher guitarist who could also play the blues. He was a great finger picker who subsequently became pretty famous just before he died. And I sat at his feet for maybe 6 weeks learning 4 songs. A wing dance, and You Got to Move, 12 Gates to the City, and I'm going to sit down on the banks of the river. Some of his seminal riffs are still with me, and I have to say that learning those 4 songs from the Reverend Gary Davis was like getting the 10 Commandments from God in a burning bush. My senior year in college, a great event occurred. Josh White came to Hamilton to give a concert. I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I got my tickets weeks beforehand. I listened over and over to my Josh White records, Miss Otis Regrets, Jelly, Strange Fruit. I couldn't believe I was actually going to meet and listen to my greatest hero. At the time, I had a girlfriend from a nearby college in Massachusetts. She came up to Hamilton for the weekend because she wanted to hear Josh White also. We both were so stoked. We were also both virgins. And at some point, I snuck her into my dorm room. I'd gotten up the nerve to purchase a condom prior to her visit. Believe me, that wasn't easy. So there we were in my dorm room, which was totally illegal, and I would have gotten thrown out of school if we'd been caught. But nobody caught us because everybody else had gone to the Josh White concert. What I thought was that we could make love and then run over to the concert ourselves. But I couldn't figure out how to put on the condom. My girl tried to help me, but she couldn't figure it out either. We fumbled. I finally sort of donned the condom, but by then we were so flustered that I couldn't get it up. And we both froze and were horribly embarrassed and couldn't even figure out how to screw each other. And we did not wind up losing our virginity, but we did miss the Josh White concert. If I regret anything in my long life, it's that I missed that Josh White concert. And I didn't even get laid as a consolation prize. However, you'll be happy to know that 23 years later, when we were both divorced and footloose and fancy-free, that old girlfriend and I finally consummated our relationship, and we did so in honor of Josh White, God rest his soul. Of course, I went broke and I had to sell the Gretsch guitar. Then I graduated college and I spent a year living with my French grandmother in Barcelona, Spain, writing a novel I'd eventually published called The Sterile Cuckoo. While I was in Barcelona, I had to have a knee operation. And while I was in the hospital recovering, my abuelita brought me my little flamenco guitar, and all these cute nurses crowded around my bed, and they taught me Spanish songs, like the Porompompero and Fandango de Huelva, Malagueña Salarosa, Yo Soy el Hombre del Campo. I'd also taken some flamenco lessons, so I was really into it. But then all these cute nurses took me in a wheelchair around to other hospital rooms where kids were recovering from operations, and the nurses asked me to sing songs to these kids, but not the Spanish songs that they just taught me. Those Spanish kids wanted to hear Blue Suede Shoes, Tutti Frutti, Rip It Up, You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. Screw their old-fashioned fat Spanish music. They knew what had made America great. So I came back to this country in June 1963 and lived below Greenwich Village in New York. For 6 months, I actually played my guitar in little folk cafes on Bleecker and McDougal Streets during the heyday of Bob Dylan and Dave Van Ronk, Peter, Paul and Mary, and Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Joan Baez, and all those folkies. For a while, I actually traded sets with Phil Oakes between the Café Wa and Jock's White Horse, and I forget the other dives. We didn't receive guaranteed money, we just passed baskets. Me, I'd get up there and I'd sing Strange Fruit, Cotton Fields Back Home, Frankie and Johnny, Malagueña Salarosa. I mean, I could actually sing Malagueña with all the falsettos thrown in, though not anymore, I'm sad to say, and I'm going to skip the Malagueña section here. But I quit singing. In Greenwich Village pretty quick because there was no future in it. And then I moved to Taos in 1969. And one of my first friends here was Michael Reynolds, the future inventor of the Earthship. Michael and I got together with friends on weekends in his first home, the Pyramid, over by San Geronimo, and we played music. We drank wine and smoked doobies and played Bob Dylan songs. Michael had a harmonica on a little stand around his neck, and I had my big old Josh White model Martin blues guitar, and we had great fun singing Don't Think Twice and All I Really Want to Do in the Subterranean Homesick Blues, which is one of the best songs ever written. Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine, and I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. The man in the coonskin cap badge out laid off says he got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off. Look out, kid, it's something you did, you don't know when, but you're doing it again. Better duck down an alleyway looking for a new friend. Man in the coonskin cap with $11 bill says he only got 10. I love that. But then, you know, stuff happens. Atkins. You get married, you have kids, you get divorced, you get remarried, you have stepkids, you get re-divorced, you get remarried and re-divorced. Meanwhile, your kids grow up and hit adolescence and go crazy. Then you have a nervous breakdown, you go broke, you get sick, you have open heart surgery, and it's a little hard to concentrate on music. So I relaxed. And every night for years, while I was writing all night in my kitchen, I listened to Bill Mack's Open Road Show on WBAP out of Fort Worth, Dallas, a great country music station sponsored by Rick Griffin Truck Stops, with Marie giving the traffic reports and Harold Taft, the world's greatest weatherman. So while I'm trying to write books like The Malago Beanfield War and The Magic Journey, I'm listening to George Jones singing The Race Is On, and to Tammy Wynette singing my personal national anthem, which is R-D-I-V-O-R-C becomes final today. Me and little J-O-E will be going away. I love you both and this'll be pure H-E-double-L for me. I wish that I could stop this D-I-V-O-R-C. Bum, 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 bum. Through WBAP, I came to really love country music. Hank Williams, Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, Patsy Cline, Emmylou Harris, Willie and Waylon and Merle, Dave Dudley, Tanya Tucker, Buck Owens and Jim Reeves. Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. Let's pretend that we're together all alone. I'll tell the man to turn the jukebox way down low. And you can tell your friend there with you, he'll have to go. Yep, for many years my guitar remained in a closet while I took care of other things, like marriage and divorce, open heart surgery, and fly fishing for trout, stuff like that. Then one day, I'm finally getting to the point of this riff. And one day in 2007, my friends Rick Smith and Sean Murphy, who are both musical freaks, said, let's play music together in the back of Rick's bookstore every couple of weeks. The Brodsky bookshop, located just south of Michael's Kitchen, right here in Taos. So we started playing music around 7 p.m. every other Monday or Tuesday after Ricky closed the bookstore, and we would play until midnight. And incredibly, we've kept that up for 7.5 years. Anymore, it comprises almost my entire social life in Taos, but believe me, it's a great social life. Rick and Sean are so immersed in music that they know every record that was ever made by every musician, going back to Blind Lemon Jefferson and Jelly Roll Morton, and up to the present, although they don't seem to know squat about hip-hop, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Adele, or Katy Perry. They know all the sidemen who ever sat in on a Clash record, the best of Neil Young or Johnny Winter, and they can tell you every artist who ever recorded at the Muscle Shoals studio in Alabama, and every song that Eric Clapton recorded when he was with Cream. I couldn't tell you who was the lead guitarist on a Chet Atkins record, but believe me, Sean and Rick could tell you who was the drummer, the bass player, and the triangle artist on that record, and they could reveal also who produced it and what year and on what record label it was cut. I've already told you some other musicians who played with us, and the point has always been, can't read my writing here, as Cyndi Lauper said, we just want to have fun. I'm 74 years old now, and I still haven't outgrown Chuck Berry and Little Richard. I can't play the electric guitar worth shit, but sometimes it's such a rush just to turn up the electricity and thrash. If you screw up, you screw up, and who cares? Life is short. I know it's unseemly to see a 74-year-old geezer acting like an oversexed teenager hopped up on ecstasy and Viagra. But you know, Taos is a small, eccentric town. It is a community told by an idiot that struts and frets its hour up and down Highway 64, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, and so it is always acceptable in this bizarre setting, no matter who you are or what your age is, to laisser le bon temps rouler. All right. was supposed to say, hit it, boys. You get a nickel, baby, I'll get a dime. Go down, tell them over, buy some wine. Pull out the cold, baby, fill up the cup. Drink down wine till it's all drunk up. Drink wine's booty on it. Drink wine's booty on it. Drink wine's booty on it. Pass that bottle to me. Wine, blackberry. Wine, Uncle Mary. Wine, dog cherry. Wine, no cherry wine. Pass that bottle. I would like to close the evening with a musical homage. Some of our friends who aren't with us any longer. I have to say, at my age, there's a powerful smell of mortality all around. So I'm never sure if I'm going to be next. Hence, I'm a great devotee of making hay while the sun shines. And while we've got it, we might as well flaunt it. Certainly, the people I've lost in the recent year or so did just that. Some of these folks are the ebullient Steve Parks, that obstreperous naughty poet Peter Rabbit, my tonsorial hero Juma Archuleta, the artist Charlie Strong, who gave me this Fender Stratocaster guitar, Maxine Track, a Pueblo friend, a photographer buddy from Los Angeles, Ray McSavany, who used to do wonderful workshops here in Taos, and Delfino Valerio, one of the last of the old Taos ranching breeds, Ed Morgan, an exquisite artisan who lived right down the street from me, and most recently I learned that my friend John Jareggi, a wonderful family practice doctor from Berkeley, California, has died. John was the husband of Ann Jareggi, with whom I've done several of Barbara Waters' healing workshops in the past. The Jareggis have long spent their summers here in Taos. But what John really had going for him was that he was good friends with and a colleague of another remarkable Berkeley doctor named Rodney Haddon, the man who had the holy task of delivering me, yours truly, on the day I was born, July 23rd, 1940, in Berkeley, California. John Jareggi was beloved in his community and a throwback to healthcare that was personal, caring and compassionate, hands-on, and actually helpful. So, in the spirit of all those I've mentioned above, and those that I haven't, that we all know, and in memory of all the people who have loved and recently lost, that we have loved and recently lost, and in the spirit of living life to the least while we got it, here's a song that I pulled off an old Pink Anderson record when I was about 17 years old. It's called I Got Mine. In C. I went to a crap game the other night. Certainly was against my will. I lost all the money I had, except a greenback dollar bill. $40 bill was lying on the floor. My buddy's point was 9. Then the police broke down that door, but I got mine. I got mine, Daddy. I got mine. Put all the money into my pocket. At the back door I went flying. Ever since the big crap game, I've been dining on chicken and wine. I'm a leader in high society, boys. Ever since I got mine. There's a barber shop way across town, located up on Walter Street. It's the only place on Saturday night where all the gamblers like to meet. Some people, they like to have fun. Other people like to scrap. See me and my buddies hanging around there. We need to shoot some craps. Say it's 7, 11. Won't you come, come, come? In that 7-Eleven, don't come, I'm done, done, done. I see the police before they see me. I'm gonna run, run. I'm a leader in high society, boys, ever since I got mine. I went to my best gal's house last night. The hour was just about 9. I wasn't dressed up like Henry Ford, but I was feeling just as fine. I caught her sitting on another guy's lap. I really didn't like that sign. Talk about a rascal running for his life. I wound up running for mine. I got my daddy. I got
Yeah, it is.
Down in Louisiana, met to New Orleans. Back up in the woods among the evergreen. Had a little house down the bird. Country boy named Johnny be good. Well, he never ever learned to read or write so well. He could play the guitar like a little man. Oh, Johnny, go, go, go. 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 Johnny be good. Carried his guitar in the gunny sack. Sat beneath the tree by the track. And the old engineer sitting in the shade, listening to the sound of the driver laying down the beat and the box. Stop and say my mind with a little bit more. Go, Johnny, go, go, go. 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 Johnny be good. Mama told someday you'll be our man. You will be the leader of a big old band. Daddy people coming from miles around. You will play music till the sun goes down. Someday, boy, you'll even be it right. Say Johnny be good tonight. Go, go. Oh, Johnny, go, 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 go, go. Johnny be good. I spent 5 years once writing screenplays, 3 screenplays for Costa Gavras, the Greek director who did State of Siege, Z, and Missing. And all the time Costa would say, John, I just hate endings. I don't know how to end my movies. And I have never, ever learned how to end a song. Thank you guys for being here.